Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome friends once again to our NPTEL MOOC module on health economics. We are now in the 8th week of our module. We already started with the lecture on economic evaluation, that was on the basic definitions or the basic foundations of economic evaluations. So, in this lecture we will be discussing on the theoretical foundations of economic evaluation once again and its further details. So far we have clarified about the social welfare ordering, where we address how economic evaluation is actually made, especially in different theory, and how the societal ranking of the state in the world is made. As we know that welfare economics involves hierarchy of value judgment, starting with the Pareto criteria that ranks some states but not all. Then we discuss about compensation state test to extend the ranking, but not for Pareto optimal states. And also these tests do not tell us the state that achieves the maximum possible welfare. In this lecture, we will address the individual ordinal ranking, and especially will specify that only individual ordinal ranking is not solution and strong value judgment are needed. So first we will shift to the concept of social welfare function instead of social welfare ordering. Second, we will introduce the non-welfarism concept and also the concept of extra welfarism in our latter part of our lecture. Hence, the first aspect of understanding requires its clear and systematic definition of social welfare function. A social welfare mathematical function is a function that ranks alternative social states as less desirable, more desirable or indifferent for every possible pair of social states. As we already said that the transition from SWO to SWF, where ordering to the exact function represents a clear shift from the ordinal to a quantitative measurement. The social welfare function represents society's welfare as a function of individual utilities in terms of their real numbers. It aggregates individual utilities to measure overall social welfare. So, in the early views or the economist views, those named like Jeremy Bentham and J.S. Mill tended to think utility in concrete terms, and those potentially are measurable. In Bentham work especially, this refers to hypothetical units of measurements as head-ons denoting pleasure, while other have described utility in terms of utils. Okay. Coming to the social welfare function through Boxer and Samuelson, this SWF was actually introduced by the economist Abraham Boxer in 1938. Later it was extended and also developed by economist Paul Samuelson in 1948. Hence, the most general formulation of SWF is known as Boxer or Boxer-Samuelson social welfare function. This represents society's welfare based on individual utilities. So, it's basically how aggregation is made through the individual utility is the challenge to be discussed, and in mathematical form this is written as the Wx, that is the social welfare function, is a function of individual utility A, then individual utility B, then C, then nth number. So, then each of the person's utility function is clearly identified. The key properties are out of this SWF is that it is not constrained to have a specific mathematical form, okay, not having a specific mathematical form, hence allowing for flexibility in trade off. This exclusively considers individual utilities as welfareist approach. Social welfare increases with each person's utility that is consistent with Pareto criteria. This Boxen-Samuelson SWF provides a way to represent society's well-being numerically by approximation of its individual utilities. In this figure, we have presented that W, which represents the Boxen Samuelson social welfare function, and it's often drawn as convex, not necessarily it is always the case. And if UB increases to UB prime, then you can just have a check, and UB prime and UB double prime and UA remain constant, then social welfare function actually shifted to the next level, W1 to W2 and W3 respectively. So, you can just check the changes, there are some shifts. Okay. Now, we are discussing its further details. Welfare economics transforms the ultimate goal, that is the from the SW to the SWF, and also utilizing the utility possibility frontier. In this figure, which we discussed already in another chapter, we have used the concept called utility possibility frontier. We combine here the Boxen-Samuelson social welfare function and presenting the best optimal choice. Here we will start with A within the UPF. UPF is the frontier, and A is an inefficient point. This is allowing Pareto improvements possibility by moving to point C, D and E. You can just have a check. All possibilities are there. However, X you can just have a check in the W4. X is highly desirable, but difficult to attain due to constraints. Hence, point G, C, E, D are all along the UPF are Pareto optimal, on-rankable by the Pareto principle or the compensation test which already we discussed. The SWF or the social welfare function introduces a stronger value judgment and designating C here you can just have a check, C as the best distribution of utility between A and B, that is the highest accessible indifference curve, because of this we are on the UPF, we are also attaining the highest possible welfare level. Okay. Hence, this is also known as C is also known as optimal optimorum or bliss point. Okay. So, SWF encapsulates society's views. What is the exact shape of SW, that really depends on the views about distributive justice and equity. There are many social welfare functions. The major are discussed here. Broadly 3 we are discussing, they are classical or Benthamite and utilitarian social welfare function, Bernoulli-Nash social welfare function, and Max-Min or Rawlsian SWF. Starting with the first, that is the Benthamite or utilitarian social welfare function. This advocates ethical position, and this is most desirable states of the world. This generate the greatest good for the greatest number. Okay. And where we used to make the summation of the individual utilities without its respective weights, and weights are considered to be similar, okay, across all the individual utilities. Hence, the equation is simplified as the summation, and in the two individual case we can write down as U1 plus U2, thus the W, and strictly egalitarian because every person equally weighted. And the utilitarian welfare function is shown in this figure, and you can just have a check that it's straight line as per our equation, and okay, and there are strong value judgments, aggregate utility increases, so W also increases. So, it has a one-to-one relationship. Now, if one-to-one relationship and there is a clear trade off between A and B's utility choices, plus 1 in one's utility will be a compensation of another one, and hence we will attain the maximum possible utility bundle. Now, society may want to weight individuals' utility differently. Let us allow the society to assign varying importance to individual utilities, and that's really explained with AI term. This is called welfare weight that society attributes to a person. So, in this case our slope will be, so that's here we have already explained, but in the case of weight it will be of minus small a divided by AB, and the slope is ratio of the negative. Okay. Then let us discuss about Bernoulli-Nash social welfare function as per the text from different studies. We collated and observed that Bernoulli-Nash suggested that utility function no more are actually additive, they are rather carrying as a product. Hence, the individual utilities in the two individual case we have presented here, and they are the product of each other. In case of a variant weight, then respective weights are also attached, and again in this case once reduction in one's utility will be added or multiplied with the utility of another one. We will now discuss the case of we will compare with Bernoulli, then that of this, or this then that of this. When we discuss about a product based and its respective weights, we end up with a possibility of SW function out of the Bernoulli-Nash SWF is considered to be largely rectangular hyperbola, and which has the interpretation like it makes semi-egalitarian, because the weights which we discuss as completely similar is not necessarily the same, and thus largely this is due to the diminishing MRS marginal rate of substitutions. This implies that an increase in A's utility, it is highlighted over here in like this, it is highlighted. So, UA to UA prime, we could see that from the welfare function of the BN Bernoulli-Nash S2F, there are compromisation, and from another person's utility, and we will actually reach at the maximum frontier. And but however, in this case it is not completely the same compensation or adjustment. In this case there is a smaller reduction with A's utility increase in A from here to here. You can see that it requires a smaller reduction in B's utility to UB star as compared to utilitarian social welfare function for the SWS, which was considered to be constant because we took the linear function. Now, the third one, which is quite relevant and considered to be discussed largely in social welfare discussions, that is called max-min or Rawlsian social welfare function. So Rothschild views are taken from their book as Theory of Justice. That's called Rawls' 1971 contribution. It follows the Rawlsian philosophy that's precisely called social welfare is identified with the utility of host of individuals. So, if the host of individual in the society is actually compensated very well or is actually addressed very equivalent to others, the host one is also received a great degree of justice, then in that case the society on the aggregate is considered to be the best. Hence, the minimum level of welfare is suggested by Rawls as to be guaranteed or should be guaranteed. Hence, the function is written as like minimum of U1, U2 or till n, and hence a Leontief structure is followed. And we have compared now all three. This is the utilitarian principle, then Bernoulli's equilibrium. Now here Rawlsian approach is followed, where the minimum is actually derived at the best possible choice function among the individuals, and once that is attended, if that is really guaranteed, then society attends at its best. So, the initial point which I have already said, if it is 100 and 100, then the minimum will be 100, and there are two cases you can just solve and understand. If the minimum choice between 100 and 120 is there, so the minimum will be 100, or the first person is having 120 and another is 100, then 100 is actually required, and this might be considered to be largely substitute to each other. When the perspective of utility are greatly substitutes, that means one's utility is actually largely covered by the combination of choices of others. In that case, the minimum, if any, is guaranteed, really the society receives the best. This is what is the idea, and we have already compared the three in this diagram. Then what are the problems with SW? It attempts to construct SWF and it attempts to construct SWR constrained by our ability to measure utility. So, ability to measure utility is a bigger constraint. Now, we will just clarify it between cardinal and ordinal based approach. In the cardinal one, welfare economics relies on the use of money as a proxy of utility, and that is there are some examples for it where cost benefit analysis is actually also used to explain this. There are strong assumptions as well, such as application requires caution of both interpretation of results and in making a recommendation. Whereas in case of ordinal one, we can able to compare. However, it is through the ordinal values it is possible to compare another combination. However, these are not still if utility is only measurable in ordinal scale and non quantifiable, ordinal still it is not quantifiable, and we discussed also part of Arrow's impossibility theorem where this scale is used, and if time permits we will also give further directions to it. And this has a complete direction and consistent with social welfare ordering, and is usually impossible as mentioned in the works of Arrow. We will also discuss here on the criticisms to welfareism approach of decision making in health. Criticisms are discussed through questions on relevance and underlying theories, utility as a sole measure, exclusion of community values, and utilities flawed measures. We start by relevance of underlying theories. This suggests that healthcare systems reject the use of markets as the sole means of funding healthcare. Economists often question that it is appropriate to rely on market theories of consumer behavior to provide the basis for allocating resources in non-market setting. So, then in the case of utility as a sole measure, this is as per the approach of welfare economic discussions, this is too restrictive, and assessment solely based on utility, and this seems reasonable to suggest other things than individual consumption utility. You can also refer to our Grossman analysis, which has included the health, capital or commodity as as a combination of health and other commodities. This is also discussed. Then the exclusion of community values. This is firmly rooted. Individuals are utility maximizers, ignoring the community. So, this precludes the idea, and people may voluntarily contribute to some common good, and also mentioned in the works of Professor Amartya Sen in 1907. They call it as this kind of problem. Mohammed Sen call it as counter preferential, and special. This means that the obligations towards others should be actually emphasized. However, since we are addressing the individual utilities, that might be a negligence for the community. The last one is in terms of the flawed measurement. Since people differ and the ability to convert commodities into well-being, and especially in terms of measuring social welfare with respect to utility, it is really misleading. And you can also check with the function and capabilities. Somewhere we will also address all sort of directions. Now coming to the issue of non-welfarism, which we have mentioned and promised to explain. So the discuss so far is all about welfarism foundations of economic evaluation, and it is evident that I mean, to provide comprehensive guide to decision making is really difficult. Hence alternative framework, that is non-welfarist or normative framework of economic evaluations are also required. Okay. So, what do we mean by then this non-welfarist framework? This is basically called a normative framework for social decision making that rejects welfarism, and there is no single theoretical non-welfarist paradigm, or non-welfarism is consistent with a set of theoretical perspective and prepositions, as mentioned in Morris 2012 work. After discussing this basic difference, we need to just compare the welfarism and non-welfarism perspectives on the basis of some indicator. We start by their basis. When we say welfarism, it is grounded in microeconomic theory, especially consumer choice theory, whereas in non-welfarism case, it encompasses diverse theoretical perspective and propositions. Related to formality, this is the welfarism perspective is considered to be systematically describing the the derived conclusions, which are considered to be formal, and here it is very systematic, whereas in case of non-welfarism, this is sometimes viewed as a practical but less formulated collection of guidelines. Coming to evaluation, even this chapter will be focusing on evaluations. This is the welfarism perspective focuses on primarily on individual utility and economic efficiency, whereas the other one may consider additional factors beyond utility, such as fairness, equity, community values, etc. Another concept is also important in the literature, that is called concept of extra welfarism, and this is related to the function and capabilities. The personal characteristics are based on the functioning and capabilities. In terms of functioning, we will be emphasizing on what a person managed to be, and the capabilities we will be emphasizing on the freedoms that a person has to make choices. So, extra welfarism as a concept advocated by Professor Sen and developed by Collier. As per Sen, such characteristics that influence a person or person's assessment of well-being information on them should be included into the process of comparing social states. This is also known as extra extra welfareism, because things extra to utility are included in this discussion. It considers various characteristics of individuals which are relevant to social choices, such as all the characteristics are not equally relevant in every decisions. The selection of pertinent characteristics is closely tied to the concept of need. So this is what is also emphasized. Extra welfareism in healthcare. In the context of healthcare decisions, extra welfareism emphasizes the inclusion of health as a critical characteristics in the social welfare function. It is formulated as different utility from the commodities and its utility out of health state for some consumer, some other or individuals. So, this is W stands for welfare, U stands for utility from consumption, H is the health status, also health state. So, difference between these with the social welfare function and those earlier studied, health enters the social welfare function directly instead of earlier ones, that is the welfareism SWF, where health is included alongside with other commodities, and social welfare function is determined strictly from the utilities. The main difference between welfareism and extra welfareism lies with their outcome and the source of valuation, etc. So, we will and their weighting and intertemporal comparability, etc. we will be discussing. In case of welfareism, we target with the individual utility, whereas in extra welfareism that may include individual utility as well as extra measures and indicators of well-being, such as health gain, distribution of health, or out of patient satisfaction, caregiver burden, etc. Source of validation is the affected person in case of welfareism, whereas it could be also for the extra welfareism, it could be also be an expert, representative sample of general public and decision makers. So, we have also cited the source, might be useful for your reading. Weighting, sometimes in welfareism concept, they are weighted according to the distribution of individual utility, whereas in the extra welfareism, this is allowed and often considered important as a means of incorporating equity considerations. Weights may be based on variety of considerations such as wealth or need. Intertemporal comparability of relevant outcomes, there are differences, you can just have a read. Now, coming to the criticism and limitation of this EW extra welfareism, there are issues of interdependence. Here, especially in the case of extra welfareism, integration of health and utility faces challenges due to the interdependence between them and complicating optimal resource allocation. There are some problems with exclusion of non-health utility as well, and pragmatic health focus, because the emphasis on health is the primary maxim, and might have originated pragmatically, lacking strong theoretical justification, relying on unclear external judgments. Similarly, related to community versus individual, you can just have a check. Broad distinction really between extra welfareism from the non-welfareism concept. The line between these two is really unclear, challenging the specific principles guiding extra welfareist decision making. So, these are all what we are going to cover for the next lecture is on the principles of economic evaluation and their introduction, and types of economic evaluation techniques we will be discussing. For the time being, you can stick to these readings. We have also cited the specific chapter in some cases. I think this will clarify your doubts. However, we will be happy to address your queries. With this, I must stop here. Thank you.